Hello everyone, this is Graeme Anderson from Four Corners of the Board, and today I'm going to be looking at Sabbat Magica. Now in this game, you're a magician representing your people in a contest to be crowned the best magician in Helvetia. This game has a bit of many different mechanisms. You do a little bit of bidding at the start of each round to determine who goes first. There's a bit of simple combat, a bit of area control, a bit of worker placement and powers, and a bit of resource collection. So yes, there are several different mechanisms in this game, but how do all those parts work together, and do they create a good game? Let's get to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back for my final thoughts on Sabbat Magica. So here's Sabbat Magica all set up. Now the goal of the game is to collect as many victory points as possible, and you're going to do this by having the majority in different regions of the board, through some resources at the end of the game, and through the different gardens. Now let's have a quick look at the boards. It's composed of several sections. First we have the graveyard. This will be where ghosts not active during the round are placed. The person with the most ghosts here will be first player. Next you have the manor board. This has a scoring track, the garden sections which will grant you an ability if you control it, and the manor tiles and mirrors. Then we have the drawbridge, and this is where the unused ghosts will be placed during a round. And finally, the regions board, which represents different areas your ghosts can haunt for points. Now, the gardens and the regions have a limit to the number of ghosts that can be in them, and that will be determined by the number of players. As you can see here in this region, if only playing with 2 players, only 1 space is available. If you have 3 players, 2 spaces available, and with 4 players means that there are 3 spaces available. Each region and garden can have a different number of spaces available, but as garden spaces only ever have a maximum of 2 spaces irrespective of the number of players. As well as setting up all the boards, you will also randomly place out the 16 manor tiles, and you're going to be placing the mirror tiles around the manor tiles, as well as 8 of the 10 gate tiles, so there'll be 2 gate tiles which are not used during a game. You'll then place the full moon card face up, as it is always the first card you will play with, then shuffle and deal 5 of the remaining cards face down, and you're going to be putting 1 time card back in the box. To start each game, the player will receive a magician piece, 7 ghosts of their color, a player board, 4 tokens, and 3 special action cards unique to that magician. The game is split into 6 rounds, and each round has 3 phases. First you're going to plan, then you're going to commit skullduggery, and finally stewardship. First, the planning phase. You'll move all your resources, if you have any, 1 hour to the right on your player board. And if any resources are moved to the curse box, you will lose those resources and receive 1 curse, irrespective of how many resources end up there this round. Next, the time card is flipped, and in the first round, you will always be using the full moon card. Each player then takes all their ghosts from the graveyard and drawbridge into their hands and secretly decides how many will go back to the graveyard or drawbridge. Any ghosts in the left hand will go to the graveyard, and any ghosts in the right hand will go to the drawbridge. Once everyone is done, reveal and place ghosts in the appropriate place. The person with the most ghosts in the graveyard will go first this round, and will place a token on the time card, as well as each other player. Now this is the new turn order. The time card will determine how many actions are available and what bonuses are available. Since the full moon card has no bonuses, let's have a quick look at another card. As you can see, the bonuses are located here, and in turn order, each player will select one of the bonuses, and once a bonus has been taken, no one else can take that bonus this turn. So the plan phase is complete, and we move on to the skullduggery phase. In turn order, each player will take an action and move their piece on the time card. For an action, you have 2 choices. You can either move your magician in the manor, or move your ghosts onto the different boards. To move your magician, if your magician is not already on the manor board, you'll move it to an unoccupied square. If already on the board, the magician must move 1 space horizontally or vertically, or diagonally. Once on a new space, the magician can either take the resources as depicted on the tile into the 2H space on their player board, or, if they are next to a mirror, they can smash the mirror by turning it over to the crack side and gain 3 terror points by moving their terror marker on their player board. If a cracked mirror is smashed again, it is removed from play and the magician will only receive 2 terror points. Now, instead of moving your magician, you can always move your ghosts, and each ghost can only move once per round, except the ones that are in the graveyard. Those will never move during a round. A ghost can move from the drawbridge to a garden, from the drawbridge to a region in Helvetia by paying the gate fee, and as you can see, each gate has 2 or 3 resources that must be paid from your player board so a ghost can enter the region there. The resources are placed in the central part of your board. A ghost can move from the garden or a region to the drawbridge and gain 1 terror point, and if a ghost is already in a region, they can move to an adjacent region in Helvetia without paying the gate cost. And finally, they can move from one garden to an adjacent garden. If a ghost enters there and there is space left over, it can take the free space without fighting. Or you can decide to fight all the ghosts currently there. If you enter an area and there's no space and you do not want to fight, your ghost will go back to the graveyard and you'll receive 2 victory points. If you decide to fight the other ghosts, you must pay terror points for each other ghost there. 2 terror points for each ghost of a player that is ahead of you in player order, and 1 terror point per ghost for players behind you in player order. When the terror points are spent, the active player will receive 2 VP for each defeated ghost, and now takes first place in the area. And each other ghost is moved down 1 spot. If the last ghost is pushed off the available spaces, it is returned to the graveyard and its owner receives 1 terror point. Once all player actions are complete, we move into the final phase, Stewardship. For each ghost that you have on the board that's not in the graveyard, takes 1 terror point to feed. For each ghost you cannot feed, you have to return a ghost to the graveyard and lose 1 VP. Next, you'll look at the Helvetia region, and for each ghost you have in a region, you're going to earn that many points. Finally, you're going to look at the center part of your player board, where you've been placing the pieces that you spent to open up gates. And for each set of 4 different resources, you'll remove them, and you're going to get a Chimera resource, which will be worth points at the end of the game. After that, you're just going to start a new round. After the end of the 6th round, you will have scored points during the game, and then finally you're going to add 5 points for each Chimera token you have at the end of the game. The player with the most points is the winner. Now before I give my final thoughts, I just want to mention the gardens. Each of the different garden spaces offers an advantage during the game depending on what space your ghost is at. You'll have to remember to use those abilities during the game. For example, in the kitchen, if you have a ghost in the first place, you will add 1 terror point each time you work a mirror with your magician in the manor. If you have the second space, you're only going to receive 1 extra terror point for working on cracked mirrors. Or if you look at the canteen, during the stewardship phase, when you have to feed your ghosts, if you're in the first space of the canteen, you must feed 2 fewer ghosts, and you can add 2 ghosts to your total when looking at the ghosts in the graveyard. If you're on the second space, you can feed 1 less ghost, and you add 1 ghost to your graveyard tally. And finally, I'm just going to quickly mention the power cards. This is a variant in the game, but one that is easily added to the gameplay. Each player starts the game with 3 cards, but only 1 card can be played during the game. When it is played, the other cards the player had are discarded. Now each card gives a player a unique ability during the gameplay, and all the effects are located on the back of the instruction manual. And that's the game. So let's get back to the table to see what I thought of Sabbat Magica. So, what did I think about Sabbat Magica? Well, first, let me get a few negatives out of the way. I did enjoy the art, but as you saw through the walkthrough, the art does tend to get away with the functionality of the board. It's sometimes difficult to see what the spaces in the garden area do. I mean, most of the other places on the board were okay to see, but I just wish the text and symbols were larger over the entire board so they were easier to read. Now, the symbology of the game does take some getting used to. And again, in the garden section and the manor with those 4 different special action tiles, I did have to keep reminding people what they meant during the game. Now, the resource chits are a little bit small, and you're not going to be collecting masses of them, so I'm not sure why they couldn't have been larger to make them easier to see. Now, they were different shapes and colors, which does help differentiate them. I just wish that they were larger. So, what about the game itself? How does it play? Well, I can tell you that when I first looked at the game, I was expecting a family weight game, with a description on the back of the box, the art, and the cover, but then after reading the rules, I wasn't so sure, and definitely after playing the game, it definitely has more depth to it than I originally thought. Now, the game is only 6 rounds long, so you want to be as efficient with your moves and resources as possible. And one of my favorite parts of the game is actually the turn order bidding that happens at the beginning of each round. Each round you have to figure out how many ghosts you need to get out, and that bidding for turn order I found very interesting. Yes, you can go first, but that usually means you have probably less ghosts to use during the round. And since each round is going to have a different number of actions depending on the time card you have for that round, you have to take that into your bidding as well. Now, I personally liked the tension of the game. With only having 6 rounds and a random number of turns per round makes it very tense. And you usually start your game with a plan, but the plan has to be fluid enough to evolve with the board state and the number of turns you're going to be getting for that round. I also felt that during each turn, I had a good, tough decisions to make. Getting lots of resources is usually a good thing in the game, but in this game you can't hold on to them for too long. You have to have a plan to use them within a round or 2 of getting them. If you hold on to the resources too long, you're going to be losing victory points. So when and where to move your magician to get those resources is important. but moving your magician means you're not going to be moving your ghosts for that action. Now, the garden spaces are also very useful throughout the game, such as having to feed less ghosts and getting a start of round bidding bonus. That's fantastic, but they don't score points, the regions do. And the regions need resources to open the gates, and the resources are collected by your magician. And the magician can also collect terror points by smashing the mirrors that you'll need to feed your ghosts at the end of the round. So you want to make sure to get their ghosts into the regions as soon as possible, as there's the regions that's going to be scoring each round. But the ghosts cost terror points to have them on the game board at the end of the round. If you can't feed them, it's going to cost you victory points. You also can't ignore the simplified combat, but again, the cost to fight for a space is determined by turn order, another wrinkle to what I first talked about. Turn order bidding, and that's why I found that bidding so interesting. So, do I recommend this game? Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you this game is not going to be for everybody. Some people I played with the game really did not enjoy the confines and the restrictions of the game, and a big negative for them was losing the resources if you hold on for them too long. The resources are not readily available, so losing them really hurt. I personally enjoy that though. You have to have a game plan going into this, but the plan needs to be flexible enough to change with the board state. Now, I am a little concerned about the replayability of the game. The setup is always going to be the same, with the exception of the location of the manor tiles and the makeup of the gates in the regions. You're not going to be using all the gates each game. But I'm also not sure that there's enough variability for sustained play. There also seems to be a lack of different paths to victory. There's really one main way to get points, and that's going to be through the region, and that's it. So I would recommend that this is a game that you try before you buy. I did enjoy the game, but the enjoyment was not universal with the other people that I played it with, which is why I'm suggesting a try before you buy. And with that being said, that's all for the moment. And as usual, thanks for watching.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.